But anyway.
Brian's got a tight end.
Jeez.
Wow, you're
Brutal.
like that in real life.
No.
Like what?
Accessing agent files. Brian Sovryn, early 21st century anarchist, creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now here's Brian.
That's right, the Golden Stallion here with you for another wonderful special. So many, you're getting one of these a week at least these days. And boy, am I enjoying doing it all the time. And this week, I've got, well, actually, I have a couple of guests with me. But first off, of course, I'll say the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy is here.
Hello. Don't give them more than one a week. They might start to expect it.
I know. That's a good point. But I'll have to think about that for later. But the real gem that I have here, no offense, Stephanie, of course, is...
I'm wondering if I should be offended about this.
I have Rich Dana here with me. And of course, Rich Dana, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, you've got to be next to Stephanie. You've been on the show more than anybody else.
Oh, man. Wow. That's a...
Wow. First he calls you the only real gem here, and then he says you've been on next to me more than anyone else.
Move
It's
over.
like I've got some competition here. I didn't know you swung that way, Brian.
Yeah, I think...
No, I didn't say it was the... Yeah, I didn't say it was the only gem. I said just it was the real. Oh boy. Anyway, I'm digging myself into a hole here.
Ocean, not a bathtub, right, Brian?
Well, look, this guy's got me writing the intro for. Well, yeah. Let's get into a bit of an intro for Rich. And Rich, of course, you are the head of Obsolete Press, and that's at obsolete-press.com. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, obsolete-press.com. And you've got, and I've announced this on Sovryn Tech, a couple weeks ago and a couple times now. This will be the third time I think I've talked about it, where you have Anarcho SF Volume 2 coming out. And you have asked me, and I am really honored by this, you have asked me to write the introduction for Anarcho SF Volume 2. And this is an anarchist science fiction anthology, collection. And the first one was amazing. I love it.
I just have one question about the title.
Sure.
Does the SF stand for sci-fi or San Francisco?
Yeah, no, it's definitely sci-fi. Although,
okay,
yeah,
or maybe
Davi
speculative
was
fiction.
very confused by that, being from San Francisco.
Well, I thought you were from San Francisco, Rich, and I just assumed that because I saw those letters. And where are you from? Where are you based out of?
I am based out of Iowa.
That clears it up.
Yes, in the heartland of our great country.
That's in quotes. Yes. Great country.
Yeah.
You sounded so convinced.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, Captain Kirk's from Iowa, so what the hell?
Yeah.
So
after
go ahead.
18 years in New York, I moved back to where I was born. So yeah, I'm in the
good choice. I had to get out of New York too.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. So you don't just do Obsolete Press, though, Rich. And actually, I'm having you on because I want to talk about, and I want you to give more intro of yourself and how it relates to this, because I really want to talk about something that I don't think, at least and we can choose the term anarchist, libertarian, voluntarist, pick the phrase, whatever, that they go into enough, or that they just kind of ignore, and they kind of come out and they say, well, let the market solve it. you know, and I get that. That's a fair answer to give for just about anything. But I think a lot of times people really want some details. They want more, or they want to hear perhaps even a different answer than that. And this is environmentalism. Okay. This is the, like, you know, topic non grata, or I don't know what, you know, that we just, you know, anarchists or at least of the more, perhaps the more capitalist bent, even though I'm not a fan of that word, you know, that they just don't touch. They don't even bother. And if anybody does talk about it, you know, the pitchforks and the torches come out. But, you know, I want to go ahead and bring it up because it's important to me. I've briefly discussed it on Sovereign Tech in the past. And I said, you know what? I'm going to get somebody that knows his stuff on here. And you are that guy, Rich. So why don't you go ahead and give a little more intro of yourself on that, and then, you know, let's get into it.
Yeah, no, I think I applaud you for undertaking this ambitious quest, and you've been doing a great job. And I got to say, the letters that you've been getting, I guess people by now can tell that I'm a regular listener as well.
Right on.
The letters you've been getting, I think, have been really have brought up a lot of good points and a lot of good questions, and it really does point out the fact that when it comes to the libertarian perspective or the anarchist perspective, environment is really a big stumbling block. It's like, how do we deal with these issues in a way that, you know, doesn't include statist, you know, power, and
right.
And nobody really has a really good answer to that, and so, yeah, so the fact that you've been taking that on is, you know, I think I really applaud you for that.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So Stephanie was essentially saying, you know, she doesn't know, you know, whether even if global warming is an issue, and, you know, but either way, she realizes that, you know, using the state, using force is not the answer to whatever the problem actually is. Yeah. So you would agree with that?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You know, Stephanie, I think your point is well taken, and I really want to hear more about what you think about the science part of the global warming debate. You know, I hear a lot of people saying that they're uncertain about climate change or one thing or another, and I think they should be. I think there's only a small class of people who can really say with any certainty, you know, whether this is an issue or not. But we can definitely talk about that more as we go down the road.
Right on.
But yeah, you know, it's funny because I sort of came to environmentalism through the back door. I was an outdoorsy type when I was growing up. I grew up in the 70s, and the ecology movement was really a big thing back then. They didn't call it environmentalism, and ecology. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Kind of the Dan Fogelberg having granola and right.
Shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it? The flag with the green stripes, you know?
Yeah.
The American flag with the green stripes. But you know, ecology at that time, you know, it was a scientific endeavor. It was the study of how systems work together in nature and different species coexist and all that sort of stuff. And it was all good. And, you know, we all were into it, but, you know, environmentalism didn't really come around till later. And environmentalism is really, you know, is clearly a social movement. It's not a science. And that's sort of, you know, where the problems begin, in my opinion.
So that's when you started getting interested in it more in the 70s then? That's accurate?
Yeah. And I was also really interested in anarchy all the way back to my early teens, and lived my life very much as sort of anarchist up until my 30s. Was not active politically. Argued against political interaction, and it and as I said, we spent a lot of years in New York. Where I worked for many years before moving back to Iowa, and still even into my 30s I wasn't really involved in environmental issues. It wasn't until we came back here and bought a small farm and started sort of running headlong into all the different aspects of the environmental debate that I really sort of started getting involved in environmentalism directly, and eventually kind of got dragged into the fray of politics and climate politics and all, the whole thing. And thankfully, I've come to my senses now. But
I can really relate to what you're saying, Rich, about getting dragged into it because I guess I've hung out with a lot of hippies in my life. I went to college in Western Massachusetts at UMass Amherst, and that's right near like Smith College and Northampton, Massachusetts, and it's very, very liberal. There's a lot of hippies out there, and there's a lot of cool stuff like farms and yoga classes and just hippie culture basically. And there's a lot of people who out in this, long ago, right, like maybe in the 70s or whatever, they were anti-war protesters, and now they've become Republicans and stuff, unfortunately. But there's just like a lot of hippie culture, and I liked the culture, I guess. Like, I love organic food. I love health food, okay? Like, I like tofu, genuinely. But I genuinely like tofu. But
I don't genuinely like tofu. MacGyver ate it in the 80s, and so I was like, okay, well, I better eat it. That guy's a genius.
But the thing is, like, it's really easy to get wrapped up in the culture, and then pretty soon you're starting to become involved with some of these ideas without having a chance to like question the ideas. Like I remember there being posters and stuff out by UMass where I went to college that were saying like, we need to lobby the government for some so and so carbon credit thing, and don't breathe because it might destroy the earth. And
right.
And obviously there are like good ideas thrown in there too, like don't litter, like don't throw your trash around. That seems like just common sense, right? We don't want to be stepping in trash. But like they even went so far on campus at UMass as to spray this stuff. Like there was a lot of snow because it's Massachusetts. People are walking everywhere, so they got to keep the sidewalks clear. Mm-hmm. And we don't want the college students to slip on the ice. So what they would do is take this soy sauce type stuff, like this brown soy shit, and they would spray it on the sidewalks, and it was so sticky that kids would step on it, and it kind of melted the snow and ice. It did the job well enough, and it was supposed to be a natural alternative to salt, which hurts the environment. And I get that, but the thing was, how much pollution did it create? Because kids would go into the classes and their boots would just be covered in this sticky soybean stuff. And they would step on the floors, and then someone would have to clean those floors because they would get sticky.
Right,
and how much pollution?
Some sort of solvent-based soap that then they dump down the drain, and then
yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm with you 100%. I think that most of the environmental movement, or a good deal of it, is are solutions in search of a problem.
Some of it just, yeah, exactly. Like it always, to me, I'm a scientist, I'm a logical person. I always want to ask the question, does this make sense to do? Is it worth it? And I don't feel like that question gets asked a lot in the environmental movement. Mm-hmm. Not to say that some environmental interventions or policies don't make sense, because some of them totally make sense, but not all of them. And people don't seem to distinguish or discriminate between the ones that make sense and the ones that don't.
Yeah. Well, and in Massachusetts, you're definitely in the you're at ground zero.
Yeah.
But and what happened to me was that came from the Lower East Side of New York, punk rock, Tompkins Square riot anarchist punk, and I'm out here on this farm, and we decide to start our own little organic farm. And um, we got our organic certification through a third party certifier, Oregon TILF, which is a non-governmental certifying agency. I felt good about that. And then one year we got oversprayed by crop dusters, and we could have lied and not mentioned it to anybody, but we told we had our crops tested, and found that they'd been contaminated, and we voluntarily gave that information to our third party certifier, and we started the 5-year process again.
Oh,
And
Wow. So to get like recertified,
yeah,
you had to go through all that just because this crop dusting went
right.
over you.
who was the chemtrail operator? Like, who was spraying them?
Well, our neighbor, a neighboring farm, which is owned by an investor farmer from Arkansas, was, managed by a farm services agency, and they just had it on their schedule that they were to spray these soybeans with a crop duster for mites or something like that. And they sprayed the farm with Furadan, which and he's probably working off a GPS or something. And even though our friendly government agency is supposed to tell them that they're near a sensitive crops area, that an organic farm, the wind was blowing, it carried it across. And actually I was outside taking pictures of him at the time, and was hit by the Furadan. And
Wow, so you were crop blocking and you were caught in the crossfire in the line of duty.
That's exactly what I was doing. And what I found out was that Furadan is it's legal to use to kill bean beetles, but it's illegal to use in warfare, because in World War I it was banned by the Geneva Convention because it's nerve gas. And so
Wow.
I was
Whoa, so that stuff's serious.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So our government says that yes, it's okay to spray it on your neighbor, but you can't spray it on enemy. So
It's okay to spray it on things that people will eat without washing.
right, exactly. Yeah, no problem there, right? So yeah, so I'm like, mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And and my wife and I sort of started getting involved in politics. She ran the 2000 Nader campaign in Iowa, for the Green Party, and we were kind of like the I was the libertarian and she was the Green, and we were sort of like, what's that couple, James Carville and his wife, that are I don't know, he's a Democrat and she's a Republican anyway.
Yeah.
We were the sort of the alternative version of that. I said, I was so far to the right and she was so far to the left that we met on the backside or something. But yeah, I just gradually started, getting involved with these different NGOs and trying to make sense of all this. And in the meantime, I was starting a business installing solar equipment, and so of course through that route I was also meeting a bunch of environmentalists. And it was a very strange time, because right before 2000, I was dealing with a lot of the solar business. I was dealing with a lot of sort of survivalist types who were sure Y2K was coming, and so I was busily installing their solar equipment.
How'd that work out?
Yeah, well, it worked out okay for me. Business was good. But yeah, so we got this weird sort of coalition of sort of, far righties and far lefties. And so, I was just getting active and more active. And then I got invited to come to work for an environmental nonprofit organization, a national one. And I was like, well, maybe I could make some difference,
Right.
and that's where the problem started. Uh,
That's always how they get you. They tell you you can make a difference.
yep. And so it's just like you said, it was just sort of, these were kindred spirits and people that I shared a certain amount of, the same concerns that they had, and what could possibly go wrong by, going and talking to my congressman, and long story short, a couple years later, I was a consultant to several different non-governmental organizations, all environmental groups, and I was flying to DC, and I was doing a lot of work here in the state of Iowa, working on legislation for renewable energy incentives. And
Man, flights from DC to Iowa.
yeah,
You're causing a lot of the pollution, man. You're part of the problem.
exactly. And we always had this discussion. I said they said, "What are you doing today?" I said, "I'm burning fossil fuels to save the world."
You really should be propelling yourself on your own flatulence that comes from organic cauliflower that you've been consuming.
I could do
And
that. I could do
that's
that.
really the only way to go. I can relate to that too. I'm just kidding, but yeah, I mean, it is kind of ironic, where these big environmental lobbying organizations, sometimes they can be kind of hypocritical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. And they're constantly, the ones that are effective are the ones that compromise the most. So my job from Iowa
Well,
was trying to find common ground with Republicans, even though I was an independent,
Right.
and these organizations were supposedly nonpartisan. It was still all about bringing in the Republicans. And I was really successful at it because we worked through passing tax credits and um, tax incentives for renewable energy projects, and I was still able to sort of justify it to myself because I'm like, hey, I just passed a bill to take the sales tax off of solar in Iowa.
Right.
That's good, right? And so I was sort of deluding myself that I was actually doing something good when it was really just a shell game. Um, and and then,
Well, describe to me why would you call it a shell game? Like what you were doing? Like,
well, what we're doing is not. I wasn't in helping the organic farmers that were my friends to get to be able to afford solar or to make solar competitive with the fossil fuels industry. I was just moving money around so that what could happen is, people like, uh, you know, Mid American Energy, which is owned by Warren Buffett.
oh,
I fought them tooth and nail to get farmer-owned wind developments going, and they wouldn't let our farmers on the grid, and they wouldn't let them on the grid. And then, soon as there were enough tax incentives to make it cash flow, they started putting up their own wind farms. And, of course, Warren Buffett just reaped humongous amounts of benefits from all those tax
sure.
breaks that he was getting on his wind farms. So I basically did his footwork for him.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but then uh, I guess it would have been about 2005 or so. These groups all started wanting me to. It was no longer about incentivizing renewable energy. All of a sudden, it became about climate change. And I was saying I don't know anything about climate change. I do know how to get these Republican congressmen interested in tax breaks for putting up wind and solar, and I don't really care. I don't know about climate change, and I don't really care about it.
Right.
But I got into going to some of these training seminars where they're people who are trained by Al Gore's organization, and they went out in sort of the evangelical model, which is what I think Al Gore was going for at that time.
Sure.
Um, they were going out and training climate activists, and I went to some of these trainings, and their big thing was don't get in arguments about the existence of climate change. It is a fact. So don't waste your time arguing whether climate change is real or not. And I said, well, I don't have the data to go tell somebody that. I'm not going to sell that. Because
it's like, take it on faith, just do it.
That's what it becomes. It's just faith, because faith is belief without evidence. And it's so hard to parse out the evidence. It's so hard to even access it, because a lot of the climate change evidence, so-called, is in academic journals that are behind paywalls. So how can you even actually look at the data and make a decision for yourself? You can't, if you're a layperson.
Nope, that's exactly right. And that was basically the end of my career in politics. I went back to climbing on roofs and putting in solar panels, and I said goodbye to my expense accounts and my nice hotel rooms in Washington, D.C., and went back to the farm and returned to my anarchist roots, and I've stayed there ever since.
Well, kudos to you for that. Yeah. I mean, seriously.
You've tasted the dark side, but you pulled out. I mean, that's really cool.
Been to the depths of the soul-sucking vortex and managed to fight my way back out.
Incredible.
With solar lighting.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and so then you went on to actually like doing things that actually, I think anyone would agree, actually does something for the environment. Like you said, doing, installing renewable energy sources, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. And we did a lot of energy efficient upgrades of historic buildings. That is kind of one of my specialties. And
How do you pull that off? Because a lot of times these, like, I don't know about where you're at, but in New Hampshire and New England especially, there's a lot of like city ordinances that say you can't do anything to buildings if they're considered historic buildings.
I know, and that's another big element of this. I have had to fight over windows. What kind of windows could be put in a building? I've had the historical preservation people from the state government and the energy efficiency people from the state government both telling me different things and telling me that they don't care what the other one says. You can't have that kind, and the other people say you can't have that kind. So it's
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Don't have windowless bunker. Yeah, that's the only solution.
Exactly.
Board up the windows.
Exactly. So again, I just can't get away from the damn government when it comes to trying to do the right thing. They just always seem to be up my ass.
Yeah. So what inspired you to? I mean, like what brought on this real concern? Like you said, it wasn't so much. Perhaps, I mean, was it it wasn't the science, or was it the science? Like, what got you to say, okay, yeah, I want this organic farm, or yeah, I'm into renewable energy. What brought that on?
Well, Eric and I were living in Brooklyn. We were farming our yard, essentially. We were doing what's called square foot gardening. There's a guy named John Jevons who's been a advocate for biodynamic farming for a long time, and we were basically doing it in our backyard in Brooklyn, and we came
kind of backyard homesteading, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we were urban farmers before it was cool. This was back in the 80s.
I mean, if you use the word biodynamic back in the 80s, that is like plus 9,000 right there, because it's just this year it's beginning to, everything is biodynamic.
My tea's biodynamic, for crying out loud.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
It's like gluten-free.
Yeah.
Like if you were gluten-free back then, that would be even plus another 9,000.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't swear that I wasn't eating bread. I have enough trouble not eating bread now, but
right on.
New York, it's like pizza. Yeah. Not going gluten-free. Sorry.
So you're doing this backyard homesteading, and then it goes how?
And I was, you know, working on historic buildings then, doing energy efficiency stuff, getting interested in renewable energy projects. And actually, we came out to Iowa to get married because um, Erica's from Illinois, I was from Iowa, and just thought it was easier than trying to drag everybody to New York City. And we
Right.
were driving around the countryside, and she said, "Hey, you know what? Why don't we, we've been thinking about getting out of the city. Why don't we think about buying a farm out here?" And, we did. We bought a little 15-acre, century farm,
Just
and
like
moved
that.
out. Just like that. Yeah, actually, my dad was sending us the, pre-internet era, was sending us
Right.
the real estate, free real estate papers. And, sitting in our kitchen in Brooklyn, and she says, "Hey, I think this is it." And she, points it to a picture that's about the size of a postage stamp in, a black and white picture in one of these real estate papers, and goes, I think this is the place." And so I got on a plane and came out here and looked at it, and by God, it was pretty much exactly what we uh, had hoped for. And, you know,
Oh, right on.
of course, it didn't quite turn out to be everything we hoped for. It's been much more of a challenge than we ever expected, but it's taken us to some really interesting places. That's for sure. We've been
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, it's just we've been through a lot here, and we've seen a lot of change you know, in the environment, in the countryside here, in the politics, and in the economy of the countryside and of rural America. I mean, it's all wrapped up together. We could, this environmental thing. It's a hard one to lasso for sure.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. So, you said earlier that you kind of, you listened to, I guess this would be in the 70s when you initially mentioned it or initially heard about it, about how everything's kind of interconnected, or that was kind of the spiel being given in the 70s. Like, right. That not necessarily, is that accurate that that's what they were saying?
Yeah, that's the ecology really actually is an academic field of study,
Right.
and it's the interconnection of systems, natural systems. So
Right.
it wasn't really a woo woo, oh, we're all connected thing. It was actually,
Yeah. Straight up. Yeah.
it was like
It was real
it was
science.
like, you your poop gets eaten by bugs, and those bugs do this and fertilize this, and then, that grows, and then you eat that. It was that kind of thing.
Right. And so, I mean, you heard that those, and I agree. That's what happens. Like, that's science.
Yeah.
Why don't we just cut out the middleman and just eat our own shit, really? I mean, that would just be much more simple.
I'm not sure that we aren't.
Yeah.
They may have already taken care of that for you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Well, it's not actually yours, but it may be
it might be someone else's.
Even better.
Mexico, yeah.
As long as it smells like bananas,
Oh, don't even get me started on that.
I don't want
yeah. So all right. So, you accepted the science, and that's why, you were running your farm the way, that you are, and that you have been. I mean, is that the long and short of it?
Yeah. It's a stand for sure. We've taken a stand here. We thought seriously about bailing, but we said no. We've built this place up. It's gone from being sort of a bald, windy hilltop to being a heavily wooded area with, incredible biodiversity. And we're in the middle of gigantic industrial agriculture farms, but we're sort of a little island of nature here, and
a little paradise.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, as far as like now you've gotten to see, and this is really, amazing to be talking to someone that was definitely so knee deep, perhaps more neck deep in, in the government, end of this. And I think this is, for starters, I mean, I want to talk about some of the science of it, no doubt. But I think for starters, part of what like detracts a lot of libertarians or anarchists, whichever, from this conversation or from, even talking about, environmentalism is that even in Washington, it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you, Rich, it's a mess. Like nobody has any real answers at all. And I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think that's a big detractor to the conversation alone?
Well, sure. I mean, you look at the deal that President Obama has been trying to cut in China this week, and you know,
What is that? I don't pay attention to what these people
yeah,
do.
and I try not to, but somehow I keep getting dragged back. I just have this morbid fascination. But some
I got
people
to see the train wreck. I have to see it.
yeah, some people just call me a straight up collapsitarian, and I'm not sure that's inaccurate because yeah, I'm just sort of going, well, if all this went down in flames, maybe maybe we can figure out how to put it back together. But short of that, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a rat's nest.
Yeah.
But yeah, Obama's been negotiating trade deals and climate negotiations with China, and and the Republicans who I hate to agree with, but on the other hand, they're saying, well, what's in this deal for us? And what they're saying is, well, we're going to continue to cut our carbon emissions, and the Chinese are going to promise to stop building new coal plants by 2035. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah. I had heard this was pretty landmark.
yeah,
What was the agreements that were made in like the past week?
yeah. And so the Republicans are saying, well, we're reducing, and they're saying that they'll stop building new plants in 20 years. I mean, how does that work? And, honestly, the Chinese have, they're building, they've, I don't know, orders of magnitude increased their output of coal-fired power plants to the point where, they were less at the turn of the century, they were burning less coal than the US, and now they're burning, I don't know, 4 times more than we do. And that's not because we've reduced so much. It's because they're building their infrastructure so quickly. And
Right.
so yeah, for us to, we're just pushing pennies around on our end. I don't really blame Republicans for saying, why should we address this when the Chinese are doing this? What is the point of U.S. climate policy? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that makes any sense.
Right. So do you think that,
Well, the point is to give the government more control over people's lives. I don't even think, like all government policies, just like, speed limits are not about safety, just like all this car registration and inspection is not about safety. This is not about the environment.
Right. And the
It's
climate debate is not about climate. The climate debate
yeah.
is about keeping people who perceive themselves as Democrats and people who perceive themselves as Republicans separate. I mean, it's very important that they keep their bases intact. And, the enthusiasm that those parties have, or the members of those parties have for their party, I feel is like it's mostly based on hating your neighbor. It's like
sure.
it's like if that jackass across the street believes in climate change, I'm not going to believe in climate change because he's an
Right.
ass.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, so would you feel like, I guess then do you think a lot of people just have like a fatalistic view, essentially saying that, well, if China gets to, keep building stuff up, why do I have to care? Or just like, okay, yeah, maybe some libertarian types will say, yeah, all right, I get it. Let's say the science is solid, but look, China's going to keep building this crap anyway. So why should I care? Why shouldn't I just take advantage of that? I mean, do you ever hear attitudes like that?
Oh yeah. Well, and there's I saw a cartoon recently. I think it's like a New Yorker, one of those very droll cartoons where two people are sitting in a auditorium looking at presentation on climate change, and the one guy says to the woman something like, well, what if this is all a hoax and we create a better world for nothing? It's like, and
Who's pulling off the hoax?
Yeah, right. And so it's like, I've sort of been a little bit in that position where I'm like, well, is it really bad if we, convert to more solar energy? No, it really is. I mean, whether climate change is occurring or not, some of these technologies are definitely worth taking a look at. I mean, this is what we do. We advance technologically.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if it makes sense, it'll happen naturally if an environmental intervention makes sense, it'll happen naturally without the government having to, quote, encourage it or make people do it. And if it doesn't make sense, then it doesn't make sense. And why are we doing it? Right.
And I'll tell you, I think we made much more progress advancing renewable energy without the climate debate muddying the waters. We were having a very good we were having very good luck talking to farmers about why this would make economic sense for them. And ultimately, solar's going in like crazy now, and everybody, is patting themselves on the back for having passed these policies to help. Well, that's not why it's going in so fast. It's going in so fast because the Chinese have flooded the market with cheap panels, and panel prices have dropped to about 25% of what they were when I
produced in their coal burning plants.
And that's exactly right. And that's what the Chinese understand. China is a country that's run by engineers. It's not run by a bunch of, so-called elected, people, representatives of the people. It's run by engineers, and those engineers are saying, well, we can burn coal till exactly 2035 when we can turn these plants off. We can go fully renewable, and by that time we will have like crushed the competition. So
yeah.
Well, it's funny. We don't need central planning to make these things happen. Like, at some point in the future, it will make sense for China, for factories in China, not for China, but the individual factories in China, to convert to different sources of energy, because either the price of coal will go up, the environment will become more polluted, and it's already really polluted in China.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the worst places in the world for
definitely.
pollution. And at some point they will have some incentive, and it may happen gradually, like in the US, for instance. I remember at one point I was looking at houses in New Hampshire, and people were saying, well, don't get something with electric baseboard heat because it's really expensive to heat it in the winter. And the alternatives were like coal, propane, wood pellets, which the government has now outlawed.
Fuel
yeah,
oil.
and fuel oil, yeah. And so, part of that decision of what kind of house to get and with what kind of heating was what's the cost of heating it, and that decision factors into all of these decisions. That information, which is conveyed through prices, factors into all these different decisions that individuals make about what kind of energy to use and where to throw their trash and all kinds of stuff like that. And if we just allow prices to happen, they will naturally convey that information to consumers, and those changes, technological progress will occur, and the environment will become cleaner because it makes sense, because technology will get to the point where we can do things, we can do our daily activities without hurting the environment, and at a lower cost and in a more efficient way. So it's all natural. It doesn't need central planning to make that happen.
Well, unfortunately, and I agree with you, but unfortunately the reality of particularly the energy industry, well, in the agricultural industry as well, is that we're at the tail end of, more than a century of central planning. And, the energy grid was built by easements that were granted by the government. The utility companies are monopolies that are sanctioned by the government. I mean, this was one of our big problems when we were trying to put in solar. People were saying, "Oh, it's so expensive," and why why should we give tax incentives for putting in solar? It's like, do you have any idea how much government money is going into, the coal industry, the nuclear industry, et cetera? Those nuclear power plants were built by the government essentially. And that
Right.
infrastructure was either built by the government or with the assistance of the government. And so we have a grid that's centralized. You can't choose who you get your electricity from.
And they don't want you to get off that
generally
grid.
right. You can't.
Right. I mean, you can't have a different company run power lines to your house because you don't like
Right.
the company that's serving your territory. So yeah, how do we undo that? I always like to tell the story of, the rural electric cooperatives, and I used to argue with these lobbyists for these rural electric cooperatives who are very conservative. And I'd say rural electric cooperatives are a product of the New Deal, which is like the most socialist program ever.
Yeah.
You guys
Wasn't
would
there
not.
some government energy board that was trying to make sure everybody had electricity, and it still existed until like the 1990s, as I understand it?
No, and it still exists to this day in one form or another. The rural electric cooperatives are still regulated by the USDA, and yeah, it was they were it was to reduce the drudgery of the life of the farm wife was the big pitch, bringing electricity to reduce your drudgery. And so, they sold this to all these farmers, most of whom were at that time charging batteries with wind turbines.
Yeah, they were independent, like they were energy independent, right?
Right, exactly. They were making Henry Ford built these tractors to burn on ethanol, which you could easily make in a still on your farm. And you had your Zenith wind turbine that charged your battery. So you had lights and you could listen to the radio and have all the high tech gizmos. And then during the Depression, they decided to do this central station model, and partly to sell the power that from these big hydroelectric dams that they built as part of the WPA, Rebuilding America, and all that stuff. And then they built them,
Right.
and they needed a market for all that electricity, so they ran wires all through the countryside. And one of the requirements to getting hooked up was that you had to tear down your wind turbine, because they did.
Wow.
Yeah, because they said if you
You're
were
either with us or you're against us.
That's
Doesn't that
exactly
remind
right.
you?
Yeah, and we argued this, into the 2000s with these rural electric guys. They're like, you cannot put wind turbines on our grid, and
wow, that's amazing, because all that whole argument is just about. Okay, so this originally this argument was, look, we got to do something with all this power, and we've got to give it out to somebody.
mm-hmm.
And now the argument is that we don't have enough.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's the same deal with the ethanol. I mean, farmers were making ethanol and running their tractors on it, and then all of a sudden, and this gets into conspiracy land, but when they outlawed alcohol in the United States, the temperance movement was funded in a large part by the Rockefellers, who owned Standard Oil, and so they.
I thought it was funded by the Christian feminists who hated men and didn't want their husbands to beat them. It depends on who you ask.
Yes,
it?
exactly.
There's always some conspiracy. It just depends on who you ask.
Right.
But yeah, that makes sense I didn't know that about the Rockefellers, but I'm sure there were all kinds of special interests involved in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are always, and there are now, and so separating environmentalism from environmental policy and environmental law is just something that I don't have an answer to, but it certainly isn't what I hear from a lot of my libertarian friends, which is, oh, well, you just let cut everything, cut all the government regulation, get rid of the EPA and let the market decide. Well, the market is completely distorted by what the government intervention that's happened over the last 100 years. So, like,
right.
How do you get back to square one
Yeah, how can you possibly get equilibrium when there's a gun in the room,
I think we're going to have to get off this planet.
or when there's been one? Yeah.
Let's worry about the environment of Mars.
Stephanie, actually, that kind of brings a point, and this is something that one of the solutions, or not solutions, but one of the reasons I think people should be interested in energy efficiency, let alone energy renewal, but energy efficiency alone, is that, boy, if we ever want to go to space, you are not going to want these, technologies that run full bore, requiring so much energy and whatever. I mean, you're going to want the most energy efficient technologies you could possibly have. So I think it's beneficial for the future of the human race, not governments, but for the future of the human race, to make a lot of these what some would call green technologies. I really do. And it's funny too, because a lot of these libertarian types, it's like, they want a car that gets great gas mileage. It's like, okay, so you want efficiency there, but then we start talking about getting energy efficiency somewhere else, and you're not willing to pay the extra money for that. It seems like a weird.
Well, they have to see the benefit to them. Like if they're not like aware of the issue, like me, I don't necessarily want to just pay extra for something when I don't see the benefit that would give me,
Mm-hmm.
So It has to be explained and sold in a logical way. To me, at least.
Okay, well, so I guess the way to get this out to libertarians, so can solar panels help produce drugs? No, I'm kidding.
Absolutely.
Now everybody's excited.
Yes. Yes. You can
think about the marijuana farming.
Panels.
Yeah, there we go. Grow lights with solar panels. Okay, everybody.
Match made
All right,
in heaven. Yes.
Yeah, so we solved the problem. Libertarians are now totally on board.
Maybe on this thing here.
Wouldn't you like to smoke a doobie on Mars?
Somehow.
Yeah, we're
going to have to repopulate Mars too. I mean,
yeah, there you go.
All right, yeah, I think these are all interesting points. But something, I mean, you had to talk to Republican types. You had to talk to all types of politicians. What is something I hear often is like nuclear energy, and that's another popular answer to a lot of this stuff. It's like, well, if we have an energy crisis, and that is directly correlated to environmentalism, we could solve it by nuclear energy, but the government just won't make new plants, or there's things in the way of doing that, or there hasn't been new research in nuclear energy in 25, 35 years. They forgot about thorium. I mean, what exactly? How did you pitch? Or like, what was your response to that with them when they would say, well, we want to do nuclear energy? I mean, how did that work out? How did those conversations go?
Yeah, and it's funny because, again, Warren Buffett, after he'd cornered the wind market in Iowa, decided that he wanted to start building new nuclear plants in Iowa. And we have one, or I think we have only one in the state that was built in the 70s. And, having grown up as a sci-fi geek and still being one, obviously, I'm sort of an agnostic about nuclear energy. I have a friend who lives in New Mexico who feels very differently about it than I do because of the environmental impacts of the uranium mining. But in terms of being an energy source, I don't have that big of a problem with it. And if carbon is really our goal, carbon reduction, then, honestly, that's something that we have to look at. And one of the environmental groups that I worked for, the scientists that worked for the organization, there was a group of them that wanted to put out a white paper on nuclear, and they were banned from doing that because they didn't, even if it was negative, they didn't want to even discuss it. So again, it's something like, and this, when I first started being aware of the environmental movement was back in the no nukes 80s, and a lot of people they have a knee-jerk reaction to the nuclear energy and nuclear technology, and so it's pretty much a non-issue. It's pretty much dead in the United States, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not. If we're going to continue to have growth-based capitalism, we're just going to have more and more and more power until something happens eventually.
Yeah.
But and if that's the model we're going for, then hell yeah, build some nukes. We're going to need them.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question, Rich. I mean, there's a really great quote, though sadly I can't remember who exactly said it. But it's that not the U.S. and I guess that's really what all of us here can really talk about well enough. Like the U.S. doesn't have an energy crisis. Even though, granted, this is a worldwide, perhaps a worldwide problem, but the U.S. doesn't have an energy crisis. It doesn't have an energy problem. It has a energy consumption problem.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? Like, what does that say to you?
Yeah, I think there's a consumption issue in general across the board, and I mean, why are they building all those coal-fired power plants in China? It's so that we can have iPhone 6 Plus. Um, it, it's
Isn't that kind of a drop in the bucket, though, compared to the military? I mean, the government is one of the biggest consumers of energy.
Oh, I think all of this is certainly.
Oh, sure, but the military. I don't know what the military energy consumption is, but interestingly enough, when I was an energy specialist for the National Center for Appropriate Technology, in the first week I was there, I got a phone call from somebody at DARPA who was
Oh boy,
who was wondering how to make biodiesel out of poppy seeds.
Wow.
Yeah, because they're garden plenty of those.
Yeah, because the Marine Corps was looking to go more green, and then about 6 months later, there was a cover story on the New York Times, Marines Go Green, and it showed they had solar tent flaps, and they were running all their vehicles on biodiesel, and it's like, hey, we're killing people, but we're green. But I just thought it was
The
awesome
irony.
that I was like, the guy didn't fess at first that he was from DARPA, and I said, what kind of seeds are you gonna press for this oil? And he said, poppy seeds. I said, where do you get enough poppy seeds to? And he said, well, it's for the U.S. forces, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah, they
okay.
have plenty of access to poppy seeds.
Yeah,
Just make sure you
would
save the
probably
heroin
know about
first.
that.
That's a key step.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, right. So,
Yeah.
the government has their own plan in mind. I think the military does.
Sure. So, actually, that leads to an interesting question. I mean, I think if I've understood some past conversations you and I have had, and certainly, obviously, a guy from DARPA is asking you about this stuff, that's qualification enough. I mean, but like, how good? A lot of people talk about biodiesel and like putting 10% ethanol into gas, and how that will like it kills the whatever
It corrodes the engine.
corrodes the engine. Yeah, it kills the the seals and everything. Not the animal, the seals, but the seals of the car. Yeah,
It's not good for seeds either. Yeah.
yeah, right. Certainly not good for them. But I mean, like, how do you feel about a lot of these biofuels? I mean, do you think that's practical to use?
Well, again, we're looking at corn-based ethanol, and corn is heavily subsidized by the government. And, then we get into my other, pet passion, which is agriculture, and the death of the family farm, and diversified agriculture has to do with monocrop agriculture and growing soybeans and corn, and none of that would have happened if it weren't for the government either.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's just you have to keep going back and back and back with these discussions. There was plenty of ethanol being made by independent producers back before they banned liquor in the 20s and 30s, and they only restarted it again when it was government sanctioned. So, in terms of the technology, there's nothing wrong with ethanol. It's a perfectly good fuel, and cars that are designed to run on it well. And we actually make our own biodiesel out here from waste vegetable oil, and deep fat fryer oil, and And I actually drive an old K5 military Blazer. I don't know if they still had those when you were in, Brian, or if they were
No,
all
they
Humvees at that point.
yeah, it was Humvees and Suburbans when I was in, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yes. But this Blazer, it's still painted camo, and I'll fill it up with biodiesel, and I'll pull into the local food co-op and park it amongst the Priuses, and and it's like the turd in the punch bowl, but the fact of the matter is that it's way greener than any of the Priuses ever will be.
Right.
Its carbon footprint blew away in the sands of time sometime in the 80s. Plus, it's running on 100% recycled fuel, and so they look at
And
me
it
as
works.
like,
I
oh,
mean,
ew.
but even in the winter of Iowa, I mean, the thing does fine.
No, it does
No.
not. No,
Aha. Okay.
You've got to go to a percentage of biodiesel in the winter because it will gel up. So,
I see. Okay. Gotcha.
Now, Rich, I got to give you a pro tip here.
okay.
In order to get libertarians interested in your answer, there's only one word you needed to say in response to that question, which is hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, hemp.
Just
of
talk
course,
about
yeah.
drugs. I mean, you did get the poppies in there. That was good, but
Okay.
you missed the pot.
Shit. I'm glad I have you guys advising, though. I'm learning a lot.
We should be consultants.
Yeah,
Right, Brian?
we should start the Libertarian Environmental Institute, perhaps.
I love it.
Start a think tank.
Yeah, we could pronounce it lay. I like that.
Okay.
Oh, all right. So, yeah, well, hemp's another interesting thing, too. I mean, actually, you raise a great point, Stephanie, because this is an area where it seems like every libertarian is, yeah, why aren't we using this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just heard about, just this week, there was this news item where the FDA actually cracked down on Dr. Bronner's soaps, and they are Castile soaps, and they're made out of hemp fatty acids, and I think they're produced in Canada, or the hemp is grown in Canada, because
Okay.
you can't.
Canada, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they get it to grow in Canada. It's pretty cold up there, but apparently it works somehow. And
Yeah, no,
he makes the soap.
it's the perfect climate for it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but the guy, Dr. Bronner himself. Okay, so I'm sorry, Rich. It took a minute to register that. That's really interesting. I didn't know that the plant, the cannabis plant, would grow in that climate. But I suppose it's a weed, and so it'll grow pretty much anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. But yeah, Dr. Bronner himself, now he's getting gone after by the FDA because they're claiming that it makes health claims or something because it's called magic soap. I didn't read the complaint too carefully, but it was totally bogus. Like,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
just totally bullshit. And this guy is a political activist. He actually has gotten arrested several times for camping out on the White House lawn holding signs that say stuff about hemp and how it should be legal to grow hemp here.
Yeah.
And he hasn't gotten his wish, but he has gotten arrested a couple times.
Yeah, that's Dr. Bronner's son. I forget what his name is, David Bronner, I think. And yeah, he's out there for sure. He's fighting the good fight.
Wow,
I mean,
yeah.
it's just so ridiculous that you can't make soap, really, because the soap is made with a certain plant, or what? I just don't understand. I mean, now
Well-
they do have Bible verses on the soap. I am a fan. Like I said before, I love hippie culture. I use Dr. Bronner's soap
So do I.
proudly. Awesome. Welcome to the club. It works. It's great soap, and it's natural, and it's I feel good about buying it. And it's just, they have Bible verses on the packaging, but I'm really willing to cut them some slack because they do, they have a good product and they make important points. And if we don't have these kinds of political activists, then this stuff is never going to change. And I mean, I'm sorry that he's gotten arrested a bunch of times and not really changed anything, but at least he's out there kind of raising awareness about it.
Yeah, but Stephanie, I mean, you just said that, but you said without these kind of people out there, we won't get change, but isn't that kind of in conflict with your earlier point? I mean, we're all anarchists here, right? So are those people actually doing good, or are they wasting their time? And I'm asking this I personally wonder this myself, which is why I don't do
Yeah.
it anymore.
Well, I should clarify, I guess. I wasn't aware that Dr. Bronner's, the company, or the people involved in it have done any kind of political lobbying. I was referring to basically the protests and the publicity stunts where
So you're
they,
talking direct action, really.
yeah, exactly, where they flagrantly disobey the FDA rules and they go and camp out on the White House lawn. Like, that is the
Uh,
stuff. I think laws follow culture. And so you don't have to, like, eventually, if everyone believes that there's nothing bad about selling hemp soap or using hemp soap to wash your
mhm,
hands or whatever, then, then you've got the moral majority on your side, I guess. Like,
mhm.
that's the kind of activism that I do think is effective. It's just getting the word out to a bunch of people and kind of getting that public support, not necessarily political action.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I agree completely. And that was the thing, I always said, you know, government always adds laws, it never takes laws away, So
Mm,
so when I was
yeah.
doing political action, I at one point I told uh, an associate, I said, I feel like I'm just piling more band-aids onto a cancer, And it's like we just keep trying to patch these laws together. Oh, well, let's make another law to fix that bad law that we passed last year,
Right.
and then another one and another one.
Mm,
And in the meantime, yeah, then uh, it's like there are other people who are just like living it, They're just going, okay, we're just not going to pay attention to this. We're just going to do this, And I'm
Yeah.
much more in the camp of let's do this anymore than I am trying to concern myself with, changing anyone's political, uh, or
Yeah.
policy ideas.
yeah, right on. I mean, I think you're absolutely right that the market has been so distorted by past interventions and statism that it's really a mess right now in terms of environmentalism. And that's a shame. And going forward, we need market signals and prices to help people decide what to do, like to figure out whether it makes sense for them to buy solar panels or to do another kind of energy or whatever. But in order to get away from all the past gunk and kludge in the system that's been the result of all the statism, maybe what we need is more awareness raising and the kind of direct action.
Yeah, that's actually the point that segues in very nicely to what I wanted to talk about next. Is just awareness in general. And Rich, you used a key word earlier, biodiversity. And I don't think any, not I'm not just talking about any particular group. I don't think much of anybody has a really good grasp of what I consider the importance of this, of biodiversity. And now I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Actually, if you would first maybe give a definition of biodiversity, and then, what are your thoughts, your personal thoughts on biodiversity and why it's like important to you?
Oh, a textbook definition of biodiversity I could not come up with, but going back to the definition of ecology that we talked about, um,
Right.
in the natural systems, there each organism plays a role and interplays with the other ones, and when you disrupt one of those, it's going to have a ripple effect down the way. So that when you're looking for biodiversity, for instance, in agriculture, you're looking to mimic the natural systems. Like there's a guy in Wisconsin now named Mark Shepard who I'm a big fan of, and he is doing this what he calls restoration agriculture, which
Oh,
means
okay. He's written a book, hasn't he?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and it's called that. I think it's called Restoration Agriculture.
yep, and he
Yeah.
grazes pigs and cattle on the ground. He rotationally grazes them, and he grows nut trees and berry bushes and all sorts of other edible plants all together as they would be in a natural environment, but sort of maximizing the efficiency of those natural systems so that he's you only plant it once. You don't plow it up and plant it every year. You're harvesting protein, and you're harvesting fiber and vegetables and fuel sources, fuel and everything
Right.
else off the land year after year, and it just replenishes itself because you put the put the cows out, they eat the weeds and the undergrowth and open up the space around the nut trees and things, and then they fertilize that ground, and the organisms in the soil take over and make fertilizer for the plants, and then it goes on and on. And so it's got weed control, it's got pest control because they've got chickens out there that pick the bugs out of the cow poop, and I mean it all works together in one big system. So that's a really convoluted definition
of biodiversity. But real
that's
quick,
how it works. Yeah.
Okay, right. Real quick, kind of a side note. This is where I think lawn mowing came from. Is that before years ago
You
in
had
this
a cow?
country?
Yeah,
you had a cow. Yeah, or a goat, and they were eating everything up, doing this biodiversity stuff, spreading fertilizer and whatever, that being shit, and from eating
Thanks
all
for
over
clearing
the place.
that up.
Yeah, and this is and that became the standard American lawn.
Oh yeah, well,
and so.
You see pictures of the White House, the etchings from the early days of the 1800s, and yeah, they're goats and out there munching on the lawn.
Right. And so now lawn mowing is pretty much this process of keeping up that look without the actual the benefits of the system itself that put that into place in the first place.
It's like that story of it's like that joke about the pot roast where the woman cuts 3 inches off the end of the pot roast and puts it in the pan, and her daughter says, well, why'd you do that? And she says, well, my mom did that. And
right.
So then they call up the grandmother and they say, well, why did you cut 3 inches off the end of the pot roast? And she said, well, because it didn't fit in my pan.
Right. Yeah.
Great.
But I think this is it, is that because maybe some people like mowing the lawn because there's a certain degree of peace perhaps that comes with doing it, but most people get really annoyed at mowing the lawn. It's like, why are we even doing this? What did we do before? And it's like, well, you didn't do it before because of biodiversity and honestly, just, good old fashioned environmentalism before it was a catchphrase. This is just how nature worked. This is how it was done. And so Rich, I want to get back to, your thoughts. Why do you consider biodiversity, important? Why is it important to you?
Well, I think it's the natural system, and I think the natural system is the most efficient system in many cases, and we can learn a lot from that. The early ecology kind of people, there were a lot of them that were into this sort of mimicking nature thing. There's a guy called John Todd who is still around. I think he's still alive, and he invented what he called the living machine, and these were systems where wastewater would be, would go through water, different water plants and different things. And then, eventually it would be purified to the point where fish could grow in it. And then eventually it would be filtered naturally to the point where it could be reused again. So wastewater, this is the kind of thing that you would probably need if you were going to do extended, space travel.
Right. And, you're creating a circle of life.
Right. And so, yeah, again, it's kind of, I don't come at it from sort of a, barefoot, dirt hippie angle. I sort of come at it from a techno angle. I just think it makes sense from an efficiency standpoint to do things this way. We used to, when we first moved to the farm here, I used to mow up, an acre or so of yard, and it was always full of weeds and it was always full of thistles and all this other stuff. And then a few years ago, I just stopped, except for one little patch in the front that we have for, sort of hanging out. And the rest of it, I just let the brome grow up, and the thistles cycled through and the burdock cycled through and everything else. And now it's, I just have trails that are mulched with wood chips, and you can walk all around the property on these little trails, and it's sort of like a native prairie, and those thistles are gone. All the stuff that they spray chemicals, to get rid of, cycled out naturally,
Right.
They only really grow in disturbed soil. So, when you mow your lawn or when you plow up a field or something, you're just begging for these invasive species to take hold, and it'll just happen over and over again until you establish some sort of natural system where this biodiversity is taking place.
Yeah, and it
Wow, that really reminds me of the gut, the gut flora
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
bacteria.
Yeah.
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 Well,
Yeah, well,
that's
that's the thing. I mean, all these systems work the same, right? I mean, all of these natural systems.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's one thing that I worked on when I was at NCAT, and I'm working on now again is biodigesters, which is basically building a big gut, and right now I'm working at a college where we're looking at composting 100% of compostable, the food waste from the cafeteria and stuff. And one of the
Right.
things
Now, go ahead.
And one of the things we're talking about is biodigesters, and you basically, instead of waiting for the stuff to compost out on the ground, you stick it in this big anaerobic tube, and it goes through there, and 30 days later, it comes out the other end, and it's poop.
That is a monster shit.
Yeah, it's a very, very big turd. Yes. But
Well,
it's sterile, I mean, the environment is sterile because it's anaerobic, and the stuff that comes out, you dry in the sunshine, and you have perfectly finished compost in like a fraction of the time it takes to do it with some sort of fancy automated composter. You just build a big gut.
yeah.
Wow.
So, now that leads me to what I want to, hear from you next is now, I mean, we've talked about the fact that clearly, and you have as good of experience as anybody could possibly have, that the government solutions, even the government conversation, don't work and don't even exist. Like, I mean, the conversation is not even allowed to be had by
Right.
and large. And so then we talked about, all three of us talked about, direct action as being something, or just going out and living it like you're doing, Rich. And, that's to some degree that's, asking for something I love to talk about on Sovereign Tech, which is kind of an intentional community, whether it's a community of one or two or three or however many people, that just, okay, these are the rules I want to live by, regardless of the science, right or wrong. What I see in front of my face is that biodiversity works, and this ecology stuff is serious, and it allows for greater efficiency in my life. I mean, how many people would love to not have to mow the lawn anymore for crying out?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Edible
And
landscape.
yeah, and that, or have to go to, the food co-op or the store so much anymore, whatever the case may be. I mean, there's so much efficiency that even putting these things into practice, whether you believe in global warming or not, can really make your life interesting and easier, I think. So, but now you are actually working with something, maybe I'm incorrect in calling it this, but you are, like you were just mentioning, with this giant gut that you're designing, but you're working with something that's more or less an intentional community, kind of a college type thing. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, no, exactly. And Stephanie, you're gonna love that. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. But um, yeah, I am working at a small college here in Iowa. It's called Maharishi University, and it was founded by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in the 70s. And
Wow.
talk about hippie roots. I mean, it doesn't get any more hippie than the guy who taught the Beatles to meditate, right? Um,
He's the original hippie.
he was in many respects. Yeah, he was the one that sort of brought the whole Indian thing to the 60s subculture, And but yeah, he bought this defunct college in a small town in Iowa in the 70s, and started teaching their philosophy of, better health and better living through meditation. And they became an accredited university, and now they have a BA program and a MA and a PhD program there. One of the biggest
Wow.
computer science departments in the country.
Wow.
It's actually a real, it's also because transcendental meditation is kind of a hip and groovy thing. It also attracts a lot of like Hollywood types. So David Lynch, of course, I don't know if you've ever heard that he's hugely into transcendental meditation.
Yeah, I've
So,
heard some of his talks that he's given, and he really gets into that sort of thing.
yeah,
Great director. He did Dune. That's enough for
he
me.
did Dune, man. He did
Yeah,
Dune.
that's what
Yeah.
matters.
But he funded David Lynch Film School there. They've got a really good film department. So it's a real legit college, but it's also, has its roots in this intentional community, and lots of people moved out to Iowa from the East Coast and started the whole thing. And so yeah, so they converted their one of the biology professors decided to start a sustainability department a number of years ago, and it was the first BA program in sustainability in the nation. And they built this super efficient building, which is earth block, it's day lit, it's heated and cooled, all with a heat pump and solar in floor heating, and it is all PV, powered by PV panel and a wind turbine, and it actually annually makes 30 to 40% more energy than it uses. And
Wow.
so it's basically the most efficient academic building in the country that we know of.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was invited to come down there and be a part of the sustainability department on a short-term basis, and I did that. And now they've asked me to stay on, and so I'm having a great time working down there. But yes, it's a community of people that have just sort of they're actually a very libertarian lot. They sort of are we're just going to do this. We believe in this, and we're going to do it. And they just do this stuff, and they're very much into teaching entrepreneurial, and teach students how to start their own entrepreneurial endeavors. And so yeah.
Well,
so
it's interesting because entrepreneurship, I think, at its heart is just doing it, and not asking even for permission. And so I find it fascinating that a college with that attitude is now, pushing that quite a bit. It seems like a natural fit. That's cool.
Yeah, it kind of does, because, they're saying that, we're not going to wait for the governments to, institute world peace. That's not going to happen, but we're going to institute it here. The medical community all says that, the only road to health is through, taking more medications, but we're going to do preventative medicine, make sure, they have a cafeteria that's 100% organic. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it's also vegetarian.
Oh man.
Yeah.
They'll catch on to the paleo thing eventually, hopefully.
Yeah. But
it sounds amazing so far, Rich. Like
do they do
so
yoga
cool.
there, Rich? Do they?
They do. I'm really privy to what goes on. There are different levels of the meditators. There,
sure.
The students all they meditate twice a day for 20 minutes during class.
Oh, Stephanie's gonna love it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah,
they're doing yoga. That's great.
And I must feel like I went to college there. Oh no, that was UMass. No,
yeah, right.
No, but it sounds really, really cool. And one of the things that I wanted to mention to you, Rich, was just the idea that it used to be. So all of these things have their roots in like older or even ancient traditions. Like yoga was invented thousands of years ago, back even hundreds of years ago when people were doing agriculture. This was after hunting and gathering, but when they were doing agriculture, they were letting the cows graze, and they were doing these permaculture practices without really even calling them that. And they were not afraid to get in the poop and the dirt and it's not glamorous, but now we call that probiotics, and now it's a trend,
Right, exactly.
Now it's trendy again. Like, I feel like there was this time in history, not too long ago where everybody thought they could beat nature. They thought they could design better systems than what naturally springs up. And no, I'm sorry. Margarine is bad for you. It is not a technological superfood. Neither is high-C ecto-cooler. Neither are any of these meal replacements. We don't know all the nutrients that we need, and they're found in whole foods and a varied diet, not synthetic stuff. And yes, eggs are good for you, and cholesterol isn't going to kill you. And yeah, you do need exposure to dirt and germs and shit because it protects your gut, because that's the gut bacteria that you need to survive. And even on your skin. I mean, you even have like bacteria on your skin that keep out bad bacteria. So I'm just saying, like, now it seems to be this trend to like get back to nature, and to relax, to not expose yourself to a computer so much, to put down the smartphone and to not sleep with your phone in your room and to try to relax a little bit and get some sunshine and take vitamin D. And when in the past we had it all figured out, we just got away from it somehow.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And, one of the things that is really big down there is what's called Vedic. They call it Vedic science, Vedic philosophy. And it's a lot of stuff that's based on the Sanskrit text. And I
right, the Vedas. And
right.
the
And I
Mahabharata
couldn't even
and all
pretend to tell you what it's all about. I haven't been around and I haven't really studied that, but how they design their buildings and how they live their lives basically is sort of, a lot of it is based on this sort of ancient knowledge and and the guy who's the head of the sustainability department, he explains that, well, what we're trying to do is teach people not just, the environmental science or, they're going to be able to change the environment, but that actually there's a basic philosophy that needs to be changed in the world in order for this, change to take place. And we can't change the environment by these sort of political means until we've changed we sort of get this sea change of ideas about, about violence, about, what,
Right.
Anarchist hippies, the best kind.
yeah, they really are. And, I was sort of has always been sort of a hotbed of intentional communities. There's Yamana colonies were German utopians that settled here. And there are a lot of Amish communities. And one of the interesting things is there's this food project going on with the Maharishi folks who are like the ultimate hippies are going to the Amish. And because the Amish don't want to go to the government to get certified organic,
Right.
they've started this thing. It's in Fairfield, Iowa. So they've started this certification thing called Fair Food. And they buy in bulk and they're starting sort of a food hub for what is organic food that's grown by the Amish, and they go down and
How
pick
long
it up.
until they get raided for selling raw milk or something?
Yeah, well, keep your fingers crossed. You could cut this part out of the recording.
Well, I think that's really cool. And actually, maybe you could confirm this, Rich, since you're kind of an expert in this area. But as I understand it, the USDA organic certification, which you did not get with your project,
Right.
You chose to go for a third party. But the USDA organic certification is kind of bullshit. Like, you can have 5% non-organic ingredients and still call it organic, and you got to pay them a big fee and so forth, right?
Yep. And when we got certified organic, there was no USDA certification. It was still. My wife is saying it was real. It was real organic.
Yeah.
She said they're diluted standards, and which they are. You're exactly right, Stephanie. The USDA standards are designed for companies like Dole to put a USDA label on. There are things like
it's organic enough for government work, right? We got to change that phrase. It's good enough for government. It's organic enough for government work.
Yeah, and it's it's a situation where they kill the small operators just the way they did to me in the construction business, in that the same regulations apply to a multi-billion-dollar company as to a one-man operation. So if you keep chickens, and you guys, I'm sure, have heard all this stuff before. When they started the Animal ID Act, the person who had 10 chickens had to register their 10 chickens, and the people who had 1,000 chickens had to register their 10,000 chickens all at once. So they didn't have, they could register the flocks instead of the individual birds. And it's the same with cattle and everything else. So, again, it's just a way of shutting the little guy out of the market. So,
yeah, this what is it again?
Maharishi, yes,
Maharishi. Sorry, yeah,
University.
Maharishi University.
Hmm.
You raise a great point, Rich, and maybe this is unless you've got more you want to get into, maybe this is a good point to kind of end off, because I think it offers a solution to a lot of what we're talking about. Is like the Maharishi University and the Amish. By and large, these people get left alone.
Hmm.
They're doing things completely different from the rest of society, even from a social level, not just a legal or a legislative level. They're doing things, it's the kingdom upside down. I mean, and they get left alone, because I think that's what a lot of people say when they talk about intentional communities. They're like, well, they're going to roll in the tanks. No, they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And well, the thing with Fairfield and the Maharishi community is that, they're infighting in their politics and everything else. And since the Maharishi died a number of years ago, there's a lot of upheaval within that organization. But primarily the students, who are what it's all about, are, just this constant influx of really, open-minded, cool people who want to learn differently and want to approach society differently, and they just go ahead and do it. They just start doing something, and they go ahead and they do it. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of folks in the environmental community could learn from, is like, you don't need to ask permission to do this stuff.
Right. Yeah, well, I love it. Did you have more you want to get into, Rich?
No, I mean, I think, we sort of laid out some problems. We sort of talked about the roadblocks, and yeah, we're sort of at a solutions point here, which, it's nice to end on an up note.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can be seen as sort of a dire subject, but
yeah.
But yeah, I think the main thing that, libertarian, or so-called, there are a lot of disgruntled libertarians, it seems, that are referring to themselves as anarchists, and they may or may not really be anarchists. And, if that's what you call yourself, fine. But I think it's not enough just to say the market will take care of things, because the market is at a point where it really needs to be picked apart and reassembled, or an alternative market has to be built up. And that's kind of, from what I hear from you, I kind of feel like, in terms of technology, that's part of what you're looking at. And I think in terms of agriculture and other stuff, I think we need to sort of take the same approach. I think we really need to just forge ahead and try and build a different system from the ground up.
Yeah, I agree. It does need to be. I think it is from the ground up. I'm totally with you on that. I mean, I think, literally we're just going to end up with pretty much parallel societies. And that's going to be the only, it's the only solution I'm seeing. Technology is enabling a lot of that pretty well. But at the same time, we need to look at the analog world as much as we look at the digital world for any kind of solutions. And, ecology, which, I think I'm going to use that term a whole hell of a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. But it's a good time to bring it back. You'd be doing the world a favor if you brought that term back.
Yeah. So, looking into ecology, and biodiversity in all of that, I think is part and parcel with any solution to having some real freedom, because it comes into health, it comes into a whole slew of areas, efficiency in general, which, I personally strive for as often as I can in every area in my life that I can, because it makes me happier. So, yeah. I mean, Stephanie, would you agree with quite a bit of that? I mean, or
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like this conversation. I mean, Rich, you brought a lot to the table, and you've got experience in this area, and it's awesome to connect with an anarcho hippie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd consider yourself one, but I mean that in the best sense.
I was a punk. I was a little too young to be a hippie, thankfully, but I'll take it.
I wasn't implying anything about your age, just the hippie culture, like I said, that I really like.
Yeah, no, I'll take that as a compliment. And I've had I've had thoughts about trying to get some sort of event going out here, and it might be fun to have you guys out as guests if there was a way to do that. I think you'd.
Oh
I
yeah,
think you'd.
Yeah.
I
take us to the
think you'd really dig.
college.
Absolutely.
I think you'd really dig the environment out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome. I love the idea of that. But speaking of your projects, I mean, before we let you go, what you've got so much going on, man.
Yeah.
You always do. We're kindred spirits like that.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean, if you want to, get out some of the things that you're working on, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the big thing is we're launching the second edition of Anarcho-Sci-Fi. We've got a call out for submissions. So I mean, if there are writers in your audience, I would really, really encourage them to send stories in. They can be fiction or nonfiction. If somebody's we had some essays on H.G. Wells and his sort of anarchist tendencies in the last one. So,
Yeah, that was great.
If people have thoughts, I'd really like to get an article on science fiction conventions as like temporary autonomous zones. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, T.A.Z.
No, I haven't, but I'm going to learn about it.
Yeah, Hakeem Bey, or Peter Lamborn Wilson, as he's also known, an anarchist writer, came up with this concept of the temporary autonomous zone, and he wrote a book called T.A.Z. You should check it out. I think you'd like it.
I'm gonna.
But
I feel like that might apply to PorcFest a little bit.
Yeah, PorcFest would definitely qualify as a T.A.Z. for sure.
It gets
but
left
Brian,
alone for the most part with the talk about rating it every year, but
yeah, I got to get out there for that one of these years. I think I would either love it or I don't know. I kind of I kind of worry about the level of irresponsible gun brandishing going
Yeah,
on.
I have a love-hate relationship.
I worry about
with
it too,
PorcFest.
honestly.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm not going to stay there next year on
Yeah.
campus. I'm going to stay at the hotel off the premises.
Yeah. But it sounds like, in general, it sounds like a really cool thing.
Yeah.
Something I got to get out to one of these days. Anyway, so yeah, Anarcho-Sci-Fi. If folks are interested, they can go to obsolete-press.com and check out the submission guidelines. And we'd love to have people submit to that. And yeah, that's the big one for me.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah,
Awesome.
I am really excited for this. I missed my opportunity to be involved with Volume 1.
Yeah,
It's totally my fault. And but Volume 2, I'm jazzed.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled that you are going to make time to do that, and I think it'll be an excellent addition to the whole thing. And yeah, I mean, we share a lot of the same geeky.
Oh yeah, the platitudes, attitudes,
yes.
Yeah, the pleasures, the whole thing.
So I'll be glad. I'll be really interested to see what you come up with.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So
good.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, Rich, this was really, I mean, can you cover everything inside of a couple hours? Of course not. But maybe it's something. If there's, and listeners of this show, of course, can email the show, brian@zomiaofflinegames.com. That is the new email address for the show. I still have the old one, but you can email me at the new one. And if this is a conversation you want to have continue, then hey, maybe if Rich is open to it, we'll have you on again.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from people. If they have comments too, they can shoot them through the comments section of Obsolete Press. So
yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can do a Q&A or something at some point. That'd be interesting. Yeah. So yeah, anyway, Stephanie, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And thank you so much, Rich. It's been really great to talk to you.
Yeah, no, I had a great time. Thanks for having me. I hope folks enjoy it.
Yeah. So if you want more of Rich, of course, head over to obsolete-press.com. I'm going to put a bunch of links in the show notes to help everybody hot link to a lot of things we discussed here. And anyway, Rich, again, thank you. Rich Dana, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you in the audio fashion and whatever other ways are possible.
Right on.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.